Alright guys, today we're going to start a new sculpture. And I'm going to use this armature. You've seen me use this before. You don't need an armature for this particular pose because we are going to be doing a little bit of a strange subject. We're going to do a plague doctor, or at least I'm going to try and do one. If you look at this base, it is basically just a piece of wood and I put a plastic bag on it. The plastic bag is very helpful, or if you don't have a plastic bag, make sure your board is sealed so the water does not sink into the base. That's another negative with water-based clay, is that when water kind of sinks into your board, it kind of gets all moldy and stuff. What I basically have here is a pipe, and I can kind of control where these little prongs go. So when you look at the prongs, these are nothing more than a way of supporting your clay. And because I will be doing a standing pose, but for the plague doctor, it doesn't really require that much, because when you look at the subject of the plague doctor, he is wearing a robe. So when you use a robe, you can build almost a triangle. So at a certain point, I might just remove this entirely. So not that big of an issue, but I think it's kind of good to have. I'm just going to spray it with a water bottle up like this, and you basically have to kind of determine the direction. And I have an idea in my head. I haven't really gotten a lot of reference because there's not that many of like plague doctors. But I don't know why I'm so interested in plague doctors now, but because of COVID maybe. So let's get started. You've seen me before. I have my water-based clay in my bag. Remaining clay, I have another half bag. So I'm hoping that I can build a sculpture with just this. And let's see how much clay I have. So I have like little chunks here. And you can just remove the entire bag. We're going to use quite a bit of clay. Here's the clay. This is going to be my base. So I'm just going to drop it in. So I have to kind of determine where I want to put it. This might be too thick, but here's what happens. You're going to take this and you're going to push it down. And we can remove it afterwards. And you see it's getting wider as I push it down, because I think this is a little bit too thick. And you want to use the bony part of your hand, because that's going to push it down quite a bit, sort of thing. But you can see I'm going slow. I don't know why this bothers me, not having a good straight kind of surface to work out with. It's these little flat aluminum. This is even better, I think, because you can kind of push it down with more. Then if you have a sculpture stand, you can just move it. We just want to even it out. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this is the reason you want to use the serrated part first, because that's going to remove a lot of the clay and keep it really. Now I'm going to take the clay I just removed and I'm going to add to the parts that are a little bit too low. By the way, if you're looking for poses and figures, I really recommend Pose Space, because that's usually what I use these days. I used to run an open drawing session every week, but the models just gotten so expensive. If you live in a city area, they charge a lot of money. It's like, I think I was paying models $25 an hour, so you can see that gets expensive very quickly. This is my reference. You can see this is the plague doctor. Now, ideally, you'd start out building the figure, the nude figure first. and then you drape the cloth on there. I don't know what the plague doctor is. It's basically a doctor that, you know, existed during the Black Death or the Black Plague of Europe. And the reason, and this is actually you know, a historical fact, they dressed like this because at the time in the Black Death, they didn't know what was causing it. So these doctors would go to places and see if they can cure the people that were dying. And in order for that, they covered themselves in these black robes and that very iconic beak. The beak was filled with roses and different scents because they thought it filtered some of the smell. And I'm assuming it did because these doctors were also well protected. You know, the Black Death transmitted via fleas, often in rats and other animals too, like squirrels and all of that. So a lot of people died, and I think these doctors were much better protected than most people, but the fleas crawled onto people and it was a terrible, terrible time. Within a few days, people would die. So millions of people died of this, and I guess my ancestors managed to survive because I am from Europe, so the Black Death existed there. And this is the motif I'm going to be building. I want it to be maybe here. This is going to go into the lower back, so it's going to be about this height. I pretty much did my first session here. I'm still going to work a little bit on the mass of it, but in the subject, he's pretty much covered by the entire outfit, but this is kind of like an important step in sculpture. And I see a lot of people start and they'll build out the outfit, the beak and stuff, but there's something like really wrong about the underlying structure. And this is why I do it like this. I want to make sure that I at least have some anatomy in there, because I want to be able to, for example, drape the robe exactly the way it should. And if you don't know where the rib cage is and where the pelvis is, then it's going to be a lot more difficult. Often, a very experienced sculptor should be able to sculpt without even having the figure, but I think you'll find that many sculptors do use the figure. And another thing is that it's very important to always like be brushing up on your anatomy. So once you have an established figure kind of like on, you don't have to go too crazy with the anatomy, because I am not sculpting a nude figure. I'm sculpting a plague doctor. So that's the reason that you don't need to like make this really extremely detailed. But you, for example, the head, one of the things that we always neglect, and I see this a lot even in my stuff, is that often we will make the head too small, and then we'll add the details, the things that we want to highlight in the head that's too small, and it always looks a little bit off, and that's the reason this is always really important to do. And with this, you can kind of establish the direction of the hips and the way things are moving. So I noticed, or at least I'm making so that my shoulders are going down. So I'll kind of pull this like that and give it a different like style to it. You know, like I'm not going to be copying. I'm mainly going to be using the outfit to drape over. But this is the way my hips are going, if you look at it straight this way. So I'm still working on the anatomy. You know, he's a little bit too fit to be a plague doctor in the Middle Ages, but shoulders are going to be this way. This is always a very important type of thing. Actually, so the my hips are actually going to be this way. So I need to bend it a little bit before I add detail. And like this. The direction of the head, I haven't figured that out yet. I think the head might be looking straight at the viewer. And from this on, if you look at the very bottom, and the subject of the plague doctor is going to help, because the robe is actually going to be almost cone-like. So all of this is going to be disappearing. But I still want to like know where the feet are going to be and if it's the correct height. Right now, this is a little bit too short. And you can add clay a little bit at a time just to kind of make sure that everything is good about it. You just want to know where the position of the feet are going to be. And you're going to be establishing mainly the very big picture. But after this is done, and I'm going to work on it a little bit more just to kind of establish the major shapes. After this is done, you're going to just let it dry a little bit. Put your bag over it, of course, and then just let it dry and let it firm up. So from then on, we have a base to go on. But don't move into the next stage until you have the proportions right. If you need to find out the proportions, you can pretty much follow a basic drawing proportions guide. It's the human figure is about 7.5 heads tall. Most people make it 8 heads tall, dividing the 4th head at the pubis synthesis, which is right about here, onto the base of the feet. So keep that in mind, and thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.
Hey man, watch out! It's a woodpecker from space!